In this video, I'm going to show you guys step by step how I edit my Fujifilm files in Lightroom using these example photos. What's up guys, Reggie B Photo here and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new, my name is Reggie Ballesteros and I'm a wedding photographer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in today's video, I'm going to show you guys my Lightroom editing workflow step by step. My editing workflow relies heavily on presets for two reasons. One, I need to edit my photos quickly. And two, sometimes I can only edit with one hand while carrying a baby in the other hand. With that said, I do not believe in the one-click preset mentality that other photographers may have mentioned about their presets. Since every photo is different, I believe every edit will be different. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. So for me, presets serve as a way for me to quickly apply a group of settings that I use on a frequent basis. After I apply my base color preset or my base black and white preset, I use my personal adjustment presets to get the photo very close to how I want it to look. And then I dial in the final look of the photo with some individual slider adjustments. I know those new to photography might be eager to quickly get a cool look to their photos using presets, but in my opinion, presets should never and will never be more valuable than learning how to use Lightroom inside and out. So be sure to learn how to edit in Lightroom first and commit to learning how each and every single tool, slider, and adjustment works. If you have presets that you've purchased from another photographer whose style that you admire, try applying that preset to a photo and go slider by slider and see what each adjustment is actually doing to the photo. If there's something that you don't like, change it and make a new preset that better fits your photography style. With that said, for those of you who are interested in purchasing my Fujifilm Lightroom presets, I have a link in the description down below. And before you jump to any conclusions, I can assure you that these are the exact same presets that I use for all my professional wedding and portrait work. These aren't lookalikes or watered down versions. And to prove it to you, I'm going to edit 9 real-world example photos that were taken in a variety of different lighting conditions. And these photos are ultimately delivered to real-world paying clients. No smoke and mirrors here, guys. Let's get to it. So before I get started with the Lightroom editing portion, I just wanted to show you guys what version of Adobe Lightroom Classic CC that I'm using. So if we go over here and we go to About, I'm using Adobe Photoshop Lightroom Classic CC version 8.3. This is the most recent update that adds the new texture slider, so for maximum compatibility with my presets, you should be using this version. If you're using a version of Adobe Lightroom Classic CC that's older than version 7.3, you actually won't be able to install the presets at all. So next, I wanted to do a brief overview of how I organize my presets. Instead of creating a one-click preset, my presets work more like Legos and build onto each other. So because of this, I have them laid out from top to bottom in the order of my typical editing workflow. So I apply the base preset and I make any adjustments that I need to, and then I finally end things off with sharpening. So lastly, I wanted to mention that my presets were originally designed and intended for use with editing Fujifilm X-T3 RAW files. If you're also editing files from an X-T3 or even an X-T3 which has the same sensor, then you should be able to use the 0 and 1 folders for the color profiles and the base presets. But if you're editing with older Fujifilm files, for example, this file from a Fujifilm X-T3, then you're going to be using the 0A and 1A folders for the presets. And if you don't shoot with a Fujifilm camera, don't worry. As you can see on this photo from a Nikon D750, you can still use the C version of the presets here. Alright, so now that those items are out of the way, let's jump right into editing this first photo. This first photo was taken during golden hour with the sun at camera right, directly lighting the couple to give some nice natural contrast. My camera settings were at 1/8000 of a second at f1.4 at ISO 160. And I shot this photo with the Fujifilm X-T3 with a 23mm 1.4 lens. So to start things off, I'm going to apply my base color preset right here. And I'm going to go over to the exposure and bump that up a little bit. And that's too much right here, so I'm probably going to just move it a tad. And then now we're going to try to bring back down the highlights here, which this looks alright right here. And then for the shadows, I'm going to boost these up a little bit. And that's too much, so go back down. So kind of my methodology for applying these adjustment presets is kind of go in the order of the least to most amount of effect. And then once I overshoot it, I kind of bring it back and trying to dial it in that way. That's kind of how I do all my edits in general. So now that we got the shadows and the highlights kind of dialed in, let's tackle the white balance, which is arguably the most important part of my edits, just because I do a lot of portraiture. And I really need to get those skin tones dialed in nicely. So here I'm going to cool this down just a little bit. And right here, it's a little bit too cool for my taste. So I want it somewhere around here. And it is a little bit too green for me, so I'm going to bring it up to the magenta side. And right here is looking okay for me. Probably not so much. Right there is fine for me. So basically, again, it's just whenever I overshoot it, I kind of bring it back in the direction that I want it to be. So now we can add in some contrast and a little bit of clarity. Probably bring this down just a little bit. And at this point, we're getting pretty close to where we want it to be. So I will kind of fix this horizon and use this level tool right here on the transform panel. So now is the part where I'm going to darken parts of the image to better draw the viewer into the subject. While some of you might use the radial adjustment layer like that, or you might use like the vignetting effects like right here. Sometimes I think the shapes that they create are a little bit too obvious, especially when you start displaying the image in a smaller format. So instead, I do this a little differently, and I actually like to drop in multiple graduated filters so that the shape isn't too perfect and it's a little more natural and hopefully less obvious. So to do this, let's set up a couple adjustment presets so that you guys have them in your kit as well. So here I'm going to just put this as -0.32. I'm just going to save this as a new preset and just call it burn. And then there's another one that I like to use, which is a slightly less darkening effect, which is -0.12. And I like to call this one burn light. Don't make fun of my naming convention. And let's bring that back to just the regular burn. And we're gonna start dropping in our graduated filters here. So I'm gonna bring one at the top, and then if you press O, this kind of turns off on this red layer, so you kind of see where it's going. Also, if you bring in one of these graduated filters, it alters the angle a little bit, but if you hold shift, it makes that just in the vertical or horizontal portion. So I'm gonna bring this one at the top here, and then right here in the bottom, just kind of bring that. And this is just pretty loose. I just do it kind of like to eye. And for right here, let's see, I want this a little bit closer. And this one probably a little bit more back. Okay. And now we're going to head over to the sharpening and just increase the mask right here. You can zoom in and hold the Alt key, which will bring up this black and white masking layer. You just increase it till the background doesn't have any more kind of white showing in the non-necessary parts of the image. So at this point, this is kind of where my final edit would be. But before moving on to my next photo, I wanted to point out that my faded blacks, my contrast levels, and just my color profiles might be different from what you usually prefer. So I actually left this a little bit open-ended for my preset pack. So for example, if you like to use the classic chrome colors and maybe you do not like having as much fade, kind of decrease that and bring more black detail in here. And you can kind of set this up to be an entirely different look. Let's see, depending on what kind of photo that you want to create. So, you know, the difference between this and this is pretty different. So if you do like this new type of look that you have, you can always just go up here and click plus to create preset and create your own custom preset. We can just call this RBB custom contrast, and then basically what you want to do is check all of them and then unclick the exposure, white balance, any of the local adjustment layers, as well as, let's see, probably the transform. And everything else you can kind of leave enabled. So basically now you have a new type of preset that you can always go back to and use this one, or you can go back here and use that one. So that's kind of what that profiles and specifically this fade adjustment is for. This next photo is an example of a backlit lens flare situation where we need to add some contrast back to the photo. As far as camera settings go, again, it's a Fujifilm X-T3 with the 23mm 1.4 again at 1/4000 a second at f2 at ISO 160. So I'm going to add my base preset right here, and we're going to increase the exposure right here. It's looking a little ugly, but we're gonna bring that back by bringing down the highlights kind of like right here, and shadows, it's too much. Let's see, so the white's fine, and I'm actually gonna probably drop my blacks down to add some contrast in there. Let's see about the white balance. So too much. And then let's see. Okay, so we're looking good right here, and then I'm going to add really the most important tool for when you have these type of backlit situations, the haze tool, to kind of bring back that punch into your photo. So that's looking pretty good right there. So as far as this gradient goes, we're going to use our trusty burn tool again and just come in and kind of like darken these portions. I'm going to leave the top part kind of bright just because the sun is up there. And then we're going to go to our sharpening settings and come in and bring in the mask. And I think we're good right here. So this next photo was taken in the morning with the sun behind the couple, backlighting them again, but this will actually be my first example for a black and white edit. So I'm going to put in my base black and white preset here and bring up my exposure. It's a little too much right here, so I'm going to bring it down, and I want to calm down the highlights just a little bit more. And then as far as the shadows go, it's looking good right there. Add a little bit more contrast here, Good thing about black and white photos, you don't have to do the white balance adjustments. And because we're backlit again, I am going to add probably a little bit of dehaze. That's a little too much. I'm going to bring it back right here, and this is looking good for me. And here I'm going to do a little bit more complex of the burn effect. I'm going to do a regular burn at the top and at the left. And then I'm actually going to probably, let's see, do just a little bit more on each side. So just to kind of see what this is doing, it's kind of just drawing in everything a little bit closer to the subject here. And then last but not least, let's go to the sharpening again, which applies the default sharpening. And we're gonna increase this mask here. All right, good. This next example is a good example of a photo where you need to add back contrast to an edit for a photo taken on a very flat or cloudy day. So again, we're going to start with the base preset here. Then we're going to increase the exposure. That's a little too much. And then highlights are pretty good. Shadows probably all right, kind of right here. Then we're gonna tackle the white balance. Too much. I think there's a little bit too much green in here, so something like that. And then as far as contrast goes, a little bit of contrast. Let's see, clarity. And then let's see. So I don't really like the way this is angled. So I'm going to come over and run the auto, and that kind of fixes that up. And then let's see, that kind of right there. And usually this little like notch right here is in the middle, so I'm going to try to make this in the middle of the couple right there. And let's see, then we're going to come in here, and it's looking like it's a little noisy, so I'm just going to increase this just a little bit. I'm going to increase the masking. Then we're going to do the same burn. Just kind of go in here. Again, to draw that focus in. And I think that should do it for me. The next photo right here is taken in a hotel room next to a window. That is at camera right. And I made sure to turn off any other artificial lighting sources in the room to kind of give a more pure daylight look. And as you can see, it's a little underexposed because I'm trying to control the highlights of the bride's dress. So again, we're going to apply the base preset. We're gonna need a lot of exposure pushing here. Almost something like that. And then we're gonna bring the highlights back down all the way, like somewhere right here. And then the shadows just a little bit. And then it looks like we do need to fix the white balance right here. That's too much. It's a little too green for me, so we're gonna put right here, still too green, right there. And then for the contrast, it's looking pretty good right here. clarity, probably a little much. I'm gonna zero that out. We're gonna want to do graduated filter again. This is really to control the dress right here. And then really it comes down to the sharpening, masking at this point. Right there. And in this next photo is an example of a low light edit. It was pretty dark inside of this observatory, and the couple was lit by a spotlight that was directly above me and similar to these ones that you see in the background right here. And I did not use flash for this shot. It was shot at ISO 1250, which is not super high, but as you can see, I was really pushing my shutter speed lower at 1/125th of a second at f2 to kind of stop down and get a little bit more detail in this photo. So first things off, we're going to add our color preset, and you're going to need a lot of exposure pushing. Let's see. And then we're going to bring back down the highlights. That's too much. Right here is fine. And then push up the shadows just a little bit, but I do want to add quite a bit of contrast back into this. Just like right here, and that's looking a lot more punchy. So now we're going to deal with the white balance again. It's actually pretty close. I'm gonna say, it's pretty good right there. I do want to kind of adjust the hue of her dress just a little bit. So we're going to drop this down to make it a little more red. And then bring this up right there. And the luminance, let's just make this a little bit brighter. There you go. Then we're going to burn pretty much the entire surrounding part of the photo as usual. And then kind of want to see that effect again. That's kind of what it's doing there. Just fairly subtle, I personally think, but definitely entitled to your own opinion. So at this point, this one is going to need quite a bit of noise reduction. To kind of calm that down, and then we're going to need quite a bit of masking as well. Here is good. So moving right along, this photo was taken in a hotel room with mixed lighting. So some daylight coming through this door, there's a window behind me, and then obviously there's these artificial tungsten lights in here, the bathroom. So for me, this calls for a black and white photo. And let's get right to the edit. That's looking good right there. And the highlights are a little bit too much. So we'll bring that back down. And we'll bring the shadows up, like right here. And let's see. Really want to take advantage of burning in the photo and trying that focus in. For this photo, it's pretty pretty strong effect to kind of like draw you back into this part of the frame. With sharpening, we're going to again just apply some masking. And noise reduction. Looks like we don't need to go all the way to 20. Okay, so for this next photo, this was taken during the reception during a mother-son dance at a wedding. The reception was indoors with a lot of ambient mood lighting. It was lit by one off-camera flash behind the subject to the left, and then I was also bouncing a on-camera flash on top of my camera behind me to the right. Camera settings, been kind of skipping over some of them, but Fujifilm X-T3 again, 23mm 1.4 again, at 1/200 of a second, which is sync speed of my flash, at f1.6 ISO 500. So we're gonna apply the color preset, then just bump the exposure a little bit, and then let's see, just a little bit more here. Shadows are a little, sorry, the highlights, bring these down. Probably need a little bit more shadow detail in here. Then here we're gonna fix the white balance again. Let's see. This looks pretty good to me. And then the contrast. Clarity in here, and then we're actually add probably a little bit of dehaze to bring some punch. There you go. Bring some punch back into it. A little too strong, so I'm gonna back that off just a little bit, and I like how that looks. And then we're gonna burn again right here. And I just pull it from the side right here and drag it over. It's not a true science to it, you just kind of feather it. Then right there, I think, let's see, just go in here to the sharpening masking again. It's a pretty clean file, but I'm just aiming right here to make sure I tone down that artifacts there. Maybe you just bump up the noise reduction just a little bit. So for the last lighting situation, we're going to have a direct on-camera flash that is pointing directly at the subject during like the dance portion of the wedding reception. 16mm 1.4 lens, shot at half of a second at f8. Gonna add the color preset again, and then exposure's pretty close, probably like right here, and then we're gonna bring the shadows back down. Sorry, the highlights back down a little bit, and then bring the shadows back up. Probably bring this up a little bit. This photo just needs a little bit more contrast, I think. It looks a little darkened, but it's really just because the temperature is off. So let's drop that down. Good. Actually want to make this a little bit brighter. Got it. Then the clarity boost. For dance floor photos, I actually tend to add this vignette effect. Instead of burning it, I just like to kind of like darken everything instead of using the graduated filter specifically for dance photos. Then we're going to come in here and adjust the masking.
If you have any questions about how I edited these photos or my Fujifilm Lightroom presets, let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up.
In my next couple of videos, I'm going to be taking you guys behind the scenes of another engagement shoot, and I'm also going to be making a video discussing my thoughts on the new texture slider in Lightroom. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, as I post a new Fujifilm or photography video like these two every single week. And as always, if you want to see more of my photo work, be sure to follow me at ReggieBPhoto on Instagram, as I post a new photo every single day. That's it for me. Remember to get out, go shoot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.